Hey guys, welcome to the second episode of the Pessimist Guide to Cincinnati Sports. I'm your host, Vance Meek. You can follow me down there in the lower left hand corner of your screen. It should have my Twitter handle on there. If you're not already following along, you should also be following the Around the Block network if you're not already doing that. And any of the awesome Around the Block contributors that you can find, all quality people, all good writers, all good podcasters. Um, as opposed to last week after the absolute drubbing the Bengals took at the hands of the Tennessee Titans. Much more joyous week this week as the Bengals advance to 2-3 now and are officially just a game behind the leaders of the AFC North. The Bengals go into Arizona and win 34-20. And we finally got, as fans, the Bengals team that we expected to get at the start of the season. The offense showed up. Defense, we'll talk about. But the biggest thing was the offense finally showing up to a game this season, and Bengals fans kind of able to take a nice sigh of relief, so to speak. Want to start with Joe Burrow. If you go back and watch the previous game, or any really of the first four games of the season, the difference between Burrow then and Burrow this past weekend was night and day. Against the Titans in particular, he was under siege by blitzes. He couldn't move, so therefore he could not escape the pocket. He could not avoid the pass rushers, and he took hit after hit, took sacks, and anything that he was able to throw looked inaccurate. Wasn't able to drive the ball, and it just was just awful to watch. This week, if you were able to watch the game, you saw Joe Burrow as we're used to seeing Joe Burrow. He was able to move around, and we saw that multiple times as he stepped around pass rushers, behind pass rushers, stepped up in the pocket, ran around in circles a couple of times, and generally was able to extend plays and give himself some time. We saw it on a touchdown pass. I believe it was the first one to Jamar Chase. Where he, kind of rolled out to the right a little bit and threw back across his body back to the into a window, I should add, to Chase for a touchdown. But he looked more like himself, and that was something that I'm sure he wanted to experience. I'm sure the coaching staff wanted to see, teammates wanted to see, and certainly as fans, we all wanted to see the old Joe Burrow, and he was on the field on Sunday. Obviously, the big play of the game was the long touchdown pass to Jamar Chase, 66-ish yards, 58 plus air yards, which was big because that means he was able to drive on that back foot and get his arm strength all behind it. Perfect throw, launched it up in the air. It dropped right into Jamar Chase's hands. Jamar Chase was, I believe, clocked at over 21 miles per hour on the run, which is one of the faster times this season so far recorded. And at that point, I'm positive that the entire city of Cincinnati exploded at the big play finally showing up for the Bengals this year. For the game, Joe Burrow was 36-46, 317 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did throw one pick on the play where the receiver fell down. That was Trenton Irwin, I believe. I say fell down. You could argue that he was knocked to the ground. I think it was mostly incidental, and there's not really a need to discuss it, but it was not really on Burrow. But overall, fantastic numbers. And then obviously with the Higgins out, they were going to target Jamar Chase more, probably targeting Jamar Chase more anyway, considering that he made sure and point out that he was always open. He set a record for the Bengals with 15 receptions on Sunday. He also had 192 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had the big play where he showed off the long speed. He also had a nice play that was on the first touchdown where he cut back as Burrow scrambled, found a soft spot, and was able to get that one. And then on his third touchdown, he just outran the defense across the back end line and got himself open for another 6-point, 6-point conversion. They should have had 4th touchdown. Tyler Boyd made a catch, made an amazing run to get to the end zone. It was negated by somewhat questionable hands to the face against Alex Kappa. Didn't end up mattering, of course, as the Bengals were able to get the win. But he spread the ball around. Jamar Chase had the 15 receptions. Trenton Irwin, 8 catches for 60 yards. Tyler Boyd had 6 catches for 39 yards. Joe Mixon had some catches. They also ran the ball more, and I think that was important. We talked about that leading into the game. Is one of the ways to try to protect Joe Burrow and get Joe Burrow healthy and faster, keep him upright longer, was to use the run game. Now, Joe Burrow did throw 46 passes, but the Bengals also ran the ball with Burrow 25 times. He had 80-plus yards. I believe Burrow also had a few carries of his own, a few scrambles that he extended plays and ran for a first down on. Still looking for that kind of number 2 running back. I believe Travion Williams had 1 carry in this game. But they're still sort of auditioning. Chase Brown had a reception, I believe. So we'll see how that plays out. It's something that they really need to find who's going to be their guy. And we'll discuss that more as the season goes on. But definitely a position that is a battle right now, and something that we'll keep an eye on going forward. The offense as a whole, as I said, played really well, put up 34 points, scored some first half points, and really the big thing was getting out and scoring points early in this game. They had struggled to score in the first half of ball games so far this year. Well, they struggled to score completely, but especially in the first half, no first half touchdowns coming into this game, which allowed the opponents to get out in front and then just lean on that Bengals defensive line and linebackers with their running game and wear them down. The Bengals were able to get out, score points early, and keep the Cardinals from being able to do that. Unfortunately, James Conner did get hurt in that game. That also hurt the Cardinals' game plan and their ability to use a power back to wear down the Bengals defense. One other thing that I wanted to mention as far as the offense goes was I thought it was a really classy move for Zach Taylor and Burrow and Brian Callahan and whoever else's idea that it may have been to get Kwame Lassiter the second a reception in that game. At the very end, the game was over at that point, but they kind of got a quick screen to Lassiter to get him a catch. His dad obviously was an Arizona Cardinal for a number of years. So a nice moment for him. So congratulations, Kwame Lassiter, on your first career reception. Hopefully you got the ball out of that. I didn't see during the game whether or not they managed to corral that and get it put aside for him. I would assume so, but congratulations nonetheless. If you want to find something to pick with the offense this week, it would definitely be on the offensive line, where they're still kind of trying to find their way, whether it's communication issues, and that seems to be really the biggest problem. Is we've seen all year long, and we saw it on Sunday, stunts by opposing defensive lines continue to give the Bengals O-line pretty massive problems. If it's a communication issue, it seems to be between the left guard and center, which is Ted Karras at center and Cordell Volson at left guard. But they continually are letting stunts get through untouched up the middle, and that's the worst kind of pressure that a quarterback can have to deal with. So that's something that we're going to need to watch going forward, whether that's on Frank Pollock to work that out with his guys, whether that's on Karras and Volson, one or the other or both. But that is something they're going to need to solve, especially as they go in and start playing these better teams. The Cardinals, obviously, not one of the elite teams in the league, despite the fact that they played, some teams pretty well. They beat the Cowboys, who are a good team. Sunday result against the 49ers notwithstanding. But the Bengals are going to play some better teams, including that same 49ers team. And when they watch the tape and see these stunts continually be successful against this Bengals offensive line, then they're going to employ them, and they're going to employ them with even better pass rushers. And you're going to see guys like Nick Bosa, if he is healthy and playing, explode up the middle on stunts and get free shots on Joe Burrow, and nobody wants that, whether it's fans, players, Burrow himself, obviously. That's something that they really need to monitor and really need to work on, because that is and could be the one thing holding them back from being a consistently elite offense throughout the rest of this year. We've seen Burrow take some hits over the course of his career. Obviously, anybody that knows anything about the Bengals' recent history knows that Burrow has been sacked quite a bit. The Bengals went out and paid multiple free agent offensive linemen because they haven't been able to draft one. And if you're going to spend a lot of money on your offensive line, then they need to produce. And right now, it's iffy at best results so far. The offensive line is something that I do want to get into. I'm going to try to line some guests up so you're not just listening to me drone on for 20, 30 minutes every week. So I want to get some guests on. I do want to dive deeper into the offensive line issues, not only this season, but the issues with the Bengals and their inability to scout and draft offensive linemen in general. It's been over a decade, really, since the Bengals have managed to draft a really high-quality offensive lineman, and that is a chain reaction, causes a chain reaction throughout the whole team because now you're spending money on offensive linemen instead of having value at the offensive line and money available to spend elsewhere. You're having to constantly sign free agents for bigger contracts, and so you have to skimp on other places, and that could be pass rushers, could be cornerbacks, could be receiver. As we've got a bit of a conundrum coming up with T. Higgins, and we'll see how that plays out. So the offensive line is something that we should be monitoring, keep an eye on, see if they're able to make adjustments throughout the rest of the season. Because if not, especially when they start having to go to their depth in the offensive line when injuries inevitably happen, we could see more problems for Joe Burrow, which he's already had enough of over the course of his career. Going to the other side of the ball, the defense played decently well, made a couple of splash plays. Obviously, the biggest one was the Cam Taylor-Britt interception return for 6. Nick Scott made a nice play on a ball later in the game and deflected it. Jermaine Pratt got an interception. So that they had some nice plays. The cornerbacks played pretty well overall, especially considering they were down a man. But DJ Turner has looked impressive all season long in minutes that he's gotten. So when he was called on to start, he held up pretty well as a starter. Obviously, we talked about the Cardinals not being an elite team. They don't have maybe a top 5 receiving unit, but Hollywood Brown has speed, has made some plays, had a couple of plays in this game. And Michael Wilson has made some tremendous catches in what time I've got to see the Cardinals this year. And I believe they held Wilson down pretty well. I don't have his exact numbers in front of me, but he was pretty locked up for this game. So I think the cornerbacks held up well. The secondary in general held up well. Dax Hill continues to play solidly. The cornerbacks, or the other safety, Nick Scott, it's been hit or miss. I know he's taken a lot of flack from Bengals fans for his lack of production and his not being as good as Jesse Bates or Von Bell, but he did have the nice play. Hopefully they're able to channel the talents that he has because he's a very good athlete. Hopefully they can channel that into more production. Jordan Battle played solidly when they've used him as well. So the defense overall played pretty well, but the run defense continues to struggle. We talked about them against guys like Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb. On Sunday, they surrendered 142 yards rushing, good to the tune of 6.5 yards per carry, 1 touchdown. And these weren't, as I mentioned, James Conner got hurt, so this was to their backup running backs. They gave up a couple of solid gains to those guys, gave up the touchdown run to the DeMercado. So the run defense continues to struggle, and really that's troubling in a number of ways. The main reason being that this team was built to stop the run in that AFC North with guys like DJ Reader, Sam Hubbard that got extended. He's a good run defender in practice and has been, but something is not clicking, and they're giving up some chunk plays to opposing running backs. And if they want to get back in there, so back to 2-3, and they've got the Seahawks coming up next week. If they can get to 3-3 and get into the bye, as they get into the meat of the schedule, if they want to remain competitive and beat some of these good teams in the back half of their schedule and make it into the playoffs, the run defense has got to tighten up. And we'll see how they play out. They're going to play some good teams. If with the way the run defense is playing, man, when they play the 49ers here in a few weeks, Christian McCaffrey might run for 300 yards and 12 touchdowns. Like they've got to tighten that up and figure out what the issue is and get some stops, because right now the run defense is really struggling. And now, as we've shown this week, it's not even against so-called top running backs. They're giving up yards to backup running backs and guys who haven't really played a ton. So that's something to monitor. Trey Hendrickson, I did want to mention him specifically. He had another 2.5 sacks on Sunday. He's been really good. But outside of him, the Bengals haven't really gotten a lot of pass rush. Their other pass rush has come from really their safeties. Dax Hills had a couple of nights. He had a half a sack in this game. They blitz with Battle off the edge. So they're not getting sack production and pass rush production right now outside of Hendrickson, and that's something that also has to change. We talked all offseason about the need for an interior pass rush, and I'm not sure there's a solution for that this year. BJ Hill does solidly at times, but consistently they're not getting that up the middle pass rush that other teams are having versus the Bengals. So Joseph Osai is kind of working his way back in after the injury. Hopefully he can give them something. Miles Murphy is a project, yes, but he's playing decently well. Not a ton of sack production, but he is grading out somewhat favorably anyway. So that's something that we should at least be fairly happy about. He's a first-round pick. Obviously, fans want first-round selections to come in and contribute right away. But we knew Miles Murphy was going to be a little bit of a project. Great athlete, just needs to learn, needs to develop some rush moves. That was the knock on him, was they didn't really have a pass rush plan. Coming out of Clemson, he was more of a just use my athleticism and see if I can beat the opposing tackle. That won't work as much in the NFL as we've seen. But we've got to be careful to give him time. And really all the young players around the NFL, we're already seeing guys like Bryce Young in Carolina get ripped for not playing well, and we're 5 games into his career. So let's give him time. Let's understand he was a later first-round pick. I know there were some guys who were picked around that are playing much better. But you never know how those players would have done if they were playing here. You never know how Murphy would play if he was there. So there's a lot of variables that go into that. But he hasn't been terrible. I believe he does have the 1 sack at this point, and we'll see how that plays out. But the Bengals do need another pass rusher. They can't survive with just Hendrickson rushing the passer and being the only production that they're getting as far as sacks go. They've been one of the worst sounds terrible, but they've been one of the worst teams in the last year or maybe 2 years as far as sack numbers. And if Hendrickson goes down, whether it's an injury or whatever the case may be, then the Bengals have to have somebody to pick up some of that slack, because despite the fact that sacks aren't the end all be all as far as numbers go, obviously pressures more important. You want to get the quarterback hurried up and off his spot. But as we saw last year, I believe Eagles and Chiefs in the Super Bowl, and I believe they were number 1 and 2 in the league in sacks also. So getting the opposing quarterback to the ground does make a difference. It does help, does matter. Bengals need to find a way to generate pressure, and right now they're doing that with a lot of blitzes, safety blitzes in particular. We'll see how long they can manage to have that hold up. The Bengals play the Seahawks this week. I haven't got to watch a Seahawks game, so I can't really give you a lot of analysis on that. It should be interesting. I know a couple weeks ago they had, I think it was 11 sacks. So that's something that the Bengals are going to have to watch. We talked about the offensive line not always being up to what they should be. Their pass blocking grades are much worse than their run blocking grades. That's something that is going to have to change, particularly Volson at left guard. But again, the stunts and the communication between left guard and center have got to be better. And we'll see how it plays out. And then the buys after the Seattle game. I do want to switch over and talk. I'm not going to switch hats this week because it's going to be brief. But I did want to talk sort of Reds related. There's not a lot of Reds news going on right now, so there's not a lot to talk about. However, I think I speak for the entire city of Cincinnati when I say bye bye Brewers. They were swept by the Diamondbacks in the first round of the playoffs. Um, we don't need to go into a deep analysis of that, but everybody, that's a Reds fan knows that the Reds kind of downfall in the second half began just by absolutely getting waxed by the Brewers repeatedly and after the All-Star break. So I don't think anybody in Cincinnati is upset that the Brewers were swept out of the playoffs and will be watching the World Series from home along with us. Finally, I want to at least briefly mention, I know we haven't really talked about them. We didn't get into them last week. But the University of Cincinnati football team, we're kind of used to them being really good, kind of a high caliber program. Have taken a step back this year. They're 2-3 right now. They've got Iowa State coming up this weekend. If they can manage to get back to 3-3, kind of wrap the ship, get Emory Jones back on track, use the things that he does well, then maybe they still have a shot at a bowl, which would be, I think, a win for the program. As I think this was, this is obviously with the 2-3 record, a bit of a down year, but getting a win this week would be big for them and getting them kind of back on track for a 6 or 7 win season at the very least. That is all that I have. I do want to again bring in some guests for you guys, so you don't have to just listen to me try to talk to myself for half an hour. I want to have an episode soon discussing the offensive line and the Bengals' struggles with drafting and developing offensive linemen. I also want to have to talk more about the Bearcats football team, and I would like to bring a guest on maybe within the next couple of weeks to specifically talk about the Bearcats and the potential that was Deion Sanders as head coach, whether that was an actual option, whether that would have worked out the same as it has in Colorado, and some thoughts on that. So that's something to kind of look forward to. Hopefully, if you guys enjoy hearing somebody besides me yap. I do appreciate those of you who tuned in last week. I believe there were 100 and some odd views last week, which was just crazy to me because, like this episode, it was just me droning on, and that's got to be relatively hard to do because of my accent. So I appreciate all 107 of you, or however many it ended up being. Hopefully you guys weren't completely turned off and you tune back in this week, and will tune in the future. I really appreciate it. It's something that I enjoy doing, and a chance to talk about the team in kind of long form rather than broken up into smaller tweets through the week. So certainly continue to tune in if you are. Again, I appreciate it a lot. Send me your comments, questions, and we'll get to those during episodes. You can follow the show on the Around the Block Network Twitter account or X account. You can also send me questions on my account, which again, down there in your screen, and we'll try to answer as many as I can and have some fun with this. Hopefully I'll get a little bit better as we go along and we bring some guests on, and we'll see if we can't make this somewhat entertaining for you guys. But I appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you guys next week.